Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Attorney Sonia Madison. How you doing, Sonia?
I am doing good. The rain has stopped a little bit this past week, so as you know, the weather determines my mood. So
The
here we
weather
are.
determines your mood. That's right. I'm really starting to believe that that's the case. Well, I'm finding out that that is the case, you know.
Well, it's either that or Trump, so I don't know which is.
I think both of them do for you, truth be
I
told.
say I don't know which. Well, I think I don't know at some point, even though he's. Yeah, we didn't talk about this last week because we had such a fun time with our family. But I
Ah,
did want to get your thoughts on him firing the Bureau of Labor after he came out with the report of what actually is the unemployment rate and what's going on in the labor market.
yeah, typical Trump. Typical Trump. You know, I mean, what else do you say about it?
Facts
You
don't
know,
matter anymore. And that
or
was
at least the
probably a
facts.
generous report they came out with, nonetheless.
Yeah, I do think that's worth mentioning because a lot of people, look at that and say, I've heard people say, well, if you had an employee who made that many mistakes, every number she had to be revised, or she made that, if you had an employee who made that many mistakes, you would have fired them a long time ago, and she should have been fired a long time ago. And I listened to that comment, and I'm sitting thinking like, you obviously don't know how these things work. And so the reality is that most people don't know where those numbers come from, but a lot of times there's census data, basically, that is surveys that are sent out by the DLS, Department of Labor Statistics. They're sent to different employers, and those employers are supposed to respond by a certain date. But as you are aware, many times employers don't meet certain dates that are not necessarily flat out right mandatory going to cost them a problem. It causes them a problem if they don't meet that deadline. And so a lot of times employers don't meet those deadlines for reporting. And when they don't meet that deadline for reporting, what will happen is that a month or two, when the following 2 months, they'll have to, as that data comes in, the chief of the Department of Labor has to issue adjustments upward or downward, and sometimes it works in your favor and nobody complains about it. But they only complain about it when it works in your disfavor. When you find out, wait a minute, the markets were actually a little bit worse. The job market was a little bit worse than we initially reported. And so I started looking at some of the downward adjustments. They were so upset because I think Donald Trump's number went from like 139,000 to 19,000 or something in jobs. A swing in 1 month of about 120,000 and a similar swing in the following month in May and June. And so when you start looking at, there are 161 million jobs in America, 161 million employees in America. And so we're talking about 120,000 out of 160 million. 120,000 sounds like a lot. But when you consider the total number of jobs in the US, that's about 0.07%. And have I fired somebody for an error of 0.07% in my job? Not too often. And you can't even call it an error because it's not an error. You're reporting the data that's sent in to you. And as that data comes in, you're supposed to report it again. Bottom line is, he's found out that she was she was an appointee by Biden, and so they had to go anyway if she's not providing the
I was
numbers
gonna
that
say, I
fall in
mean,
line.
they can make that argument, but we know she was fired because he didn't like what the actual numbers were, and she did not skew them to his favor. I mean, we've talked about this well before he even was, elected, how he wants pretty much his whole cabinet to be loyalists and even changed executive orders so that he could essentially remove anyone who is not loyal to whatever his agenda is. And so, we know that's the reason. But and I know you try to give employers a hard time, but I also want our listeners to imagine me, you have census come out or requests every year, like just to get the numbers, just so you can report that where you live and how often are people returning those census information or actually doing those questionnaires. And so, I mean, I know you was giving employers a hard time, but hopefully people can be empathetic with, hey, how often have you actually returned your census report?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's not just people. Lives are busy. I'm not giving them a hard time. I'm just stating the fact. And
Nor
that
would
is
I
a
agree
thing.
if I'm an immigrant. Like, I'm not going to report to you, this is where I live. And,
Well,
so, it is what it is. But I'm sure
it
he would
doesn't matter
love
for
for,
redistricting.
yeah.
It doesn't matter for redistricting right now because you don't even need census data to do that. So,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and I think he fired someone else recently. I can't remember who it was, but I mean, he's been very clear. I think it was someone in the Federal Reserve Board, was recently replaced, and it was replaced by an author of the Heritage Foundation. And as you know, in the Federal Reserve Board, I mean, what ends up happening, we know the Fed chair is Jerome Powell, but he does have a board of people who are supposed to do all this research, and then they kind of decide, whether they think the interest rate should go up or down. And for the most part, I think maybe two or three of them are Republican, and maybe the other two will probably say to themselves, no, we're neutral, we just stick to the numbers. And so Jerome Powell goes off their recommendation. And I think, so of course, there have been some of them say, hey, let's recommend that we bring the interest rates down. But Jerome Powell probably says, I hear you, but let me look at the numbers because I know you're a loyalist. And then let me decide from there. So anyway, so one of them was replaced by one of the authors of the Heritage Foundation, I believe. And at a press conference, he brings him out to show this chart of this potential economic growth that is, may happen if Trump continues in the movement that he was move. Now it's been reported because he brought him out, and a lot of people in the press couldn't exactly look at the chart to really see what it was saying. But it was reported that the chart also says that the Black unemployment rate will increase
hmm.
under what's happening, which I mean, we've talked about how that's inevitably going to happen. And he said, hey, he feels like some people are naturally born laborers. And when it relates to farmers, right?
they don't. Their backs don't hurt. They're never gonna hurt.
Yeah, they don't have to get out of the draft or or make up some random excuses. And so we do know that he has, I mean, he would probably cancel us for saying this, but he does have biases when it comes to people of color. We're seeing it over and over again. So yeah, but the Heritage Foundation is back, and we see their agenda continues to roll on through Trump.
It happens. Elections have consequences, they say,
They say.
and and we see that they have consequences. Who was this Department of Justice? Those people who were involved in investigating or who were assigned to investigate the January 6th, or was it the January 6th, or was it the Russiagate? I think it was January 6th. That they're now actually all being fired.
Oh yeah,
And
Denver
yeah,
six. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then they had one of the guys. They appointed one of the guys to the DOJ. I forget what his title is, but he's now working in the DOJ. One of the rioters who was like, "F the police, kill them all," and they got him a video actually saying these things, and yet here he is with an appointment in the Department of Justice,
You
which
remember when Democrats were crucified for saying defund the police? Now
right,
here we are.
yeah, F the police. You might as well be NWA. F the police. Yeah, kill them. So he took it even further than NWA did. So yeah,
Yeah, well, and I know we got to briefly talk about this Texas redistricting. And so for some of our viewers, particularly those that probably are pretty ill-informed of what's going on in Texas, what the essential big picture is, the Republicans and Trump specifically wants to make sure he gets his same conservative Congress come midterm time. And so they want to redistrict Texas so that they can take some, I want to say like up to two or three seats that are
five,
primarily, oh, five, sorry, that are
five.
primarily Democratic, and turn them into Republican seats so that they can maintain control of the Senate and as well as the House, to also maintain control of Congress. And so some of the Democrats in those seats have fled the state because they can't redistrict without a quorum. And so if they're not there for the quorum, then they can't, put the vote to the House. And so now the Texas governor is asking the FBI and is trying to get just a lot of people involved to get them back here, to either prosecute them or to force them to sit for the vote. So, what are your thoughts on this?
it's elections have consequences. It's real. I mean, this is the thing that this is what happens when you elect somebody who's immoral, who does not have any moral code or fortitude. Um, they do things that are not right. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And so they've gotten used to doing things that are or Trump has gotten used to doing things that are quite controversial, immoral, unethical, unusual, atypical, you name it. He's used to doing it. And the rest of us are shocked by it. And you're like, well, you can't do that. Well, the law says that I can. So if the law says that I can, why not? And so the real issue with that one is that they're concerned about their wildly unpopular bill that they just passed, and they're concerned about some of the other things, some of the other tactics that Donald Trump is employing, the immigration, the way that they're approaching immigration, and a variety of other things that they're just not happy about it. And the big one is going to be the assault on Medicaid and funding and cutting a whole bunch of other things from the budgets while you're giving these big rich corporations all types of tax breaks and expanding the deficit. And so they know that that makes them very vulnerable for controlling the House in 2026. Less of an issue in 2020, I mean, for the Senate, because you get 2 Senate seats, period. But still, the point is that they want to try to make sure that they do everything that they can do to make sure that their policies don't kick them out of the control of the House, at least come 2026. And so if it means redrawing those lines, that's what they do. He's actually talking about now actually trying to run a new census, because typically that's done every 10 years. So every 10 years, each state does a census. And once they do that census, that determines how many number of people are in each district, in each part of the state. Then they'll break out the lines to supposedly represent the people of the state. But the reality of it is that they break it all out based off of demographics and who they suppose is going to vote Democrat or who's going to vote Republican. And then they draw those congressional lines in no logical fashion, really, other than the fact that it's a political fashion, in order to favor, so that the Congress people choose their voters instead of the voters choosing the Congress people. That's what we call gerrymandering. So,
And I want to remind people, because I don't want them to think, oh, now that Trump is in office, this stuff is coming up. No, look, again, this has been strategic. We talked, what I want to say, probably years ago, about how the consequences of pretty much de-escalating the Voting Rights Act. And so when you are removing these measures that required either the Department of Justice or required, sort of third party to look at how you want to redistrict, because that was part of the Voting Rights Act. Some states couldn't just say, we're going to redistrict and then that be it. They had to
mostly
go through
southern
and
states.
yeah,
The
southern states
southern states
for the
particularly,
most
yeah.
part, and again, historically, they've been racially biased against people of color, particularly Black people, and so and as you talked about, even if you're not reporting where you are in that census, they're probably even using how you vote, because they can kind of determine, okay, this area here has primarily voted Democratic or primarily voted for a Democratic president, and they can use that as well to try to determine their redistricting. But nonetheless, we had the Voter Rights Act in place so that they couldn't use these biases to redistrict. And so when we removed that, when the Supreme Court removed that, and again, the consequences of the person, which was under the first term of Trump at the time, being able to put in a more conservative court, and then it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court does say, yeah, we'll keep the Voting Rights Act, but we're going to take out some of these required provisions, and that one of those being, hey, you have to get approval from the Department of Justice, I believe it was, before you can officially redistrict. You remove that, and here again, it played out. That got done, and then here we are a couple of years later, and we're seeing states like Texas saying, hey, now that I don't have to go through this other entity to get our approval, let's do it on our own. And so, again, this has been a playbook for a while, and here we are catching up.
Yeah. Which is, the Democrats are threatening to do the same thing. Frankly, they have done the same thing. And Illinois is the example that they always look at. And they're saying that it's so choppily distributed such that, a Republican can't win the state of Illinois. So both parties do that, and have done that for years. The question is now, where does democracy go when you start dividing out districts based off of the way that people vote? Indiana, I think, is the one state that does it a reasonably way. I think um, they base their districts based off of their county. I'm not sure why you wouldn't change things off of the county line necessarily. And maybe that's because certain counties are more populous than others, and so maybe you have to do it that way. But um, they all except for two, they said they had a standard deviation of two, which means that each one of the districts pretty much had equal representation, except for literally like two votes that was off from each district that they had. And so they had theoretically a very fair and accurate way of drawing these redistricting lines. But if you look at the maps, they're all over the place. You don't do it by county, you don't do it by anything other than political affiliation, which really, I think, undermines democracy in the first place, because you're not representing the will of the people, you're representing the will of the Congress, the people who are in control. And that's what happens here. I don't know that that is anything new. It's always been the will of the people that are in control, whether it's in financial control or whether it's in legislative control. It's always been their wills, not necessarily the will of the people. But that's a different story.
Yeah. So let's talk about some medical news. So RFK Jr., which is our head of the Department of Health and Health Services, Health and Human Services, is cutting funding for the mRNA vaccine. And it's probably going to start cutting funding for a lot of vaccines, but there's been a focus on the mRNA because I guess it's a little bit more popular. But I want you to kind of explain or go through either the significance of this as well as what it is.
Well, so mRNA, it's I don't even know how far we should go into discussing this, but
I
we
was
all
gonna say,
heard.
should we bring up who was the lady that they used her cells to for cancer and all that? I can't even remember her
Oh,
name, but
okay. But mRNA basically, so we have all heard of DNA, which is the basic unit of our genetic makeup and everything. And so, in order for DNA to have an expression, it has to be converted into proteins, which are expressed throughout the body, right? So mRNA, or messenger RNA, is a way. It's sort of like that transcript where certain anatomic structures in the cell go and attach it. It reads the message. It's kind of like a recipe. It's a recipe for the development of certain proteins and expression. So when mRNA is expressed, then you have a certain protein or certain characteristic that's available, and that's throughout the whole body. So there's no protein or no substance that is created in the body without first being able to have an mRNA transcript from it. Why is that? And that's not just for humans, but that's for other types of organisms. And so viruses have DNA. Also, some of those things will have. Some of them will just only have RNA, um, but they have a transcript. And so if you can read that transcript and you can say, hey, this transcript doesn't belong in a human body. This pattern of amino acids or whatever does not belong in a human body. This is foreign material. Then you can you can make a vaccine that targets that particular sequence or that particular recipe. And if you make antibodies that target those, you can prevent infection. You can prevent, and sometimes that's even used for cancer research, for that matter. So you can identify certain sequences and certain recipes that are prescribed that prescribe the growth of a cancer. And so if you can jumpstart the immune system to fight off that cancer or fight off that virus that's coming into you, then that's good. So we've been doing mRNA research for decades, but nobody's paid any attention to it. So mRNA vaccines have come in, what they call a vaccine now is because simply you introduce the mRNA structure into the human body, and your body then generates an autoimmune response to just the sequence, a part of the sequence. And so that when you're actually exposed to the whole thing, such as the virus, then your body is already prepared to handle it and you're not debilitated by it. And so mRNA vaccines became popular to the general public around the time of COVID because they were really quick to generate um, in the lab, as opposed to some of the older techniques of generating vaccines, which required growing antibodies, whatever, such in certain viruses, and sometimes using like chicken egg embryos in order to do these things. So people who had egg allergies couldn't take them. And then they sometimes use fetal cell lines to help generate some of these things. So people had ethical problems with vaccines because they were derived from aborted fetal lines from back in the 1960s that are still perpetuated now. So there were a variety of reasons why people didn't like those older vaccines. Besides, they were inefficient, and they were effective, but they're inefficient. Now all of a sudden, COVID came along. We had a quick way to make these vaccines using an mRNA. The technology had already been in place for decades, but it had never been tried out, never really been implemented on a mass scale. And when COVID came around, we vaccinated people all over the world. Billions of people were or billions of vaccinations were given out. And so people really did not like that. The anti-vaxxers were against it. And one of the big anti-vaxxers, of course, is RFK. And so now that he has the power to do it, he wants to slash like $500 million from federal funding for mRNA research. In the grand scheme of things, $500 million is a lot of money. But the issue is not that, well, they're going to cut out funding for that too. They've already stopped funding for
Yeah, I was gonna say
the
it. I mean,
vaccine
it's
itself.
yeah, yeah.
But then the other part of it is that they're also slashing the funding for research for it. And, the federal government funds a lot of research for us by giving money to academic institutions. Sometimes you got private industries that are receiving grants, federal grants. And, when you start looking at all the different institutions that have their hands in the government's pocket, it really gives a lot of power to the government to be able to, as we see, to be able to strong arm people into compliance into their will if you should happen to have a leader with an authoritarian bent like we do right now. And so now the withholding of those $500 million is really going to impact, um, scientific development. We're going to fall. There's no question about it. We're going to fall behind as a world leader in all types of scientific research because we've got people in office now who don't care about science and who don't believe in science. And
It was a
frankly,
considered conspiracy theories and the like. And the reality is their viruses are going to continue to be an issue. I mean, you can speak on this better than I am, but I mean, just because you remove the vaccine or the technology doesn't mean that these viruses don't continue to progress. And so then we won't be able to respond to them if the research is gone.
well, right now with all of the media that goes around, it's social media and all of the conspiracy theories surrounding those things, people won't trust it anyway, even if they are available.
And that's fine if that's
So,
your own autonomy not to trust it. But, I think there are some people that will say, well, listen, I still want the option. Because I think we talked about this before when the COVID vaccine first came out and how a lot of people were using that religious reasons for not trusting the mRNA research or technology. Because I would, as an employment attorney, I would see that over and over why, hey, I should not have to take this vaccine because it's against my religious belief. And they would explain how they believe the mRNA technology or use of that would alter their DNA, which then would be against what they believe in the Bible says, hey, you should not put anything that alters what I've created in you. And so, I mean, and I think you've talked about how, hey, listen, it doesn't. That is not true. But again, if that is your belief, that is your belief. And so, but for those that then read the science and saw that, okay, that's not what it's doing, they had the option to take the vaccine.
they do. They still have the option. Unfortunately, they just have to pay for it. And so it's it becomes a public health issue. It becomes a real public health issue. And I think as the government's role in this should be help protect the public. And in fact, what they're doing is making the public much more vulnerable. One, by perpetuating and reinforcing a lot of the conspiracy theories surrounding these things. And then secondly, by decreasing our understanding and our research to know how to combat these things. And thirdly, by breaking our alliances with other countries who, within the World Health Organization, who help to monitor these things when they break out someplace else. Understand the ecosystem. This is probably a little broader view, but the ecosystem is a big circle. We're the top of the food chain. And guess what takes the top of the food chain out? The most basic of all living organisms, viruses and infectious diseases like that. And so, in order to keep the ecosystem in balance, something has to happen. And we see periodically every several hundred years or so, at least in before the time of vaccines and before we had antibiotics and other things that we could treat some of these illnesses like Spanish flu, those things, or bubonic plague. When those things arose, they wiped out millions upon tens of millions of people. And right now, we fortunately have developed the science and the technology to know how to combat some of these things. But guess how nature? I'm going to blame it on nature because I don't think that this is all an intentional strategy by people to lessen the population. But I think nature allows us to have our own skepticisms and to perpetuate those type of skepticism, such that one, we reduce funding, two, we reduce compliance and acceptance, and three, we reduce awareness of infectious diseases that will help to eventually wipe out entire populations of people because they're unprepared. So if you think somebody's going to have some biological warfare coming against us, they've done the right thing that they needed to do. Yes, sow enough distrust in the American population and that more so the American leadership and this type of research, sow enough distrust so that once we do finally interject our biological weapons, if that's what's happening, or if that's what will happen, then they're defenseless against it. If I were a weaker nation militarily, that's exactly how I would look to debilitate the American population. Get a couple, and if I was ruthless and didn't really care too much about my citizens individually, but collectively think that the sacrifice of a few people is worth the saving of the rest of the country, then yeah, you intentionally infect some of your citizens with this virus or whatever that's not going to show up until a week or two later. Get them a visa to come to the United States, wipe their noses, touch elevator buttons, doorknobs, and everything that they do. And it spread like wildfire throughout the US. And then once we see it spreading, nobody's going to take the vaccines. Nobody's going to take the new medications. We're not developing new medications for it or vaccines because the funding has been cut. And so that's one way to debilitate an entire country that you can't beat militarily.
So, I mean, essentially, we're still eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil because we have distrust in the instruction of science. I will say it also reminds me of
Preach to the choir.
but it also reminds me of gosh, I forgot where I was going, so I guess we'll just have to move on. But I was thinking a little bit about how, again, we are the weight loss drug and how we are very quick to take that without any type of reservation, even though I'm sure that there are a lot of issues going on with that. When it comes to even once we get the cancer, we're very quick to take whatever medications or get the chemo, whatever is involved in that, because again, we're if it comes to something superficial, or because I mean, even Trump is like, hey, telling some of his people, you need to take the big fat drug, as he likes to call it. Or, hey, you need to get, what was it? Like, what do people get in their face? Botox, or,
Botox.
all this other stuff. People are very quick to get that. But then when it comes to, oh, let's talk about this virus, or let's talk about some preventative medicine, then, oh, you're trying to, conform me into something or make me, lose my autonomy. And it's just interesting what people pick and choose when it comes to medicine.
But I don't know so much that people pick and choose it. Because
I mean,
sometimes people
some of
are
this is
influenced.
elective.
Yeah,
I mean, Botox
some
is
of it is.
elective.
Right. But what I'm saying is that people are influenced by what they see and what they hear. And more, I used to tell my children, I said, the key to learning is repetition. And so if you really want to learn something, you just hear it over and over and over again. And the way that social media is set up right now, you can, and us living in a quote unquote, free society or society with free speech, then you can publish anything that you want to publish on American media. You can put it on TikTok and people will start to believe it. And especially if they see it over and over and over again, is you just flood TikTok with all this information, misinformation, and then you can start changing the mindset of the people in that country, in this country. It's one of the reasons why, Donald Trump is elected now, is because of social media. They infiltrated and really flooded social media with a whole bunch of stuff, and they just happened to do it better than the Democrats did.
Well,
And
that's
there
one way of looking at it. I like how
well,
people like to conveniently ignore the biases when it comes to people of color.
where they get the bias, a lot of it is where they got the biases from. I don't think that those biases were just randomly,
Oh,
they
biases
were
didn't come from social
reinforced.
media. I
Oh,
mean, we've
they're
had
certainly
these biases
reinforced by
well
it.
before social media when it comes to
Oh,
people of color.
they're certainly reinforced by it. When you see on social media repeatedly, more than you saw on television. When I was growing up, most of the time you saw black people on TV, it was in a bad connotation, but it was just on four channels. But now you got multiple channels constantly feeding you images of black people destroying cities, and they're savages. Look at, and basically the BLM was just totally disparaged by this, and they just kept flooding social media with it. And so maybe you're not taught that, but it certainly is reinforced over and over and over again. And so fear then gets instilled, and you're just like, well, I don't know that I like this guy. There are a lot of things that I don't like about him, but everything that I've seen about the opponent, I'm I'm going for this guy right here. And so that's my personal belief.
Well, but and I would also add, I mean, I do agree that the algorithm is where, if that is what you want to see, you will be bombarded with it so much so that you will have whatever you think you need to prove, whatever it is that you already believe. But I just say it's interesting because there's a lot of messages regarding, again, the unsafeness of drugs in general. And we've even had people on our show talk about how, it's kind of best to do lifestyle changes as it relates to what you eat, as it relates to exercise. And I'm sure you, as a medical professional, I'm sure some of those classes are about, listen, people are just not willing to eat right and exercise. And so then we use the medications. But some of this could be alleviated if they eat and exercise properly. Just some, because we do know healthy people that also, unfortunately, have diseases. But yet there's no distrust in medication until you're being asked to take it for something preventative. But you're quick to take, again, certain drugs that you believe will make you feel better, and by whether that is losing weight, whether that is changing your skin tone, whether that it is filling your lips, or whatever, or even steroids. I mean, men that will take steroids just because they want to buff up, and there's a lot of information out there about the dangers of that. And yet, it's what I want to do because they feel like at this temporary moment in time, I'm happy if I feel more buffed up. But then when we talk about these vaccines, mRNA technology, oh, no, 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 now you're changing my body type. Well, that's what that steroid did, but you didn't care when the steroid does it. And
but
while the scientific research is sharing to you that this does not do this, it was what you wanted to do with that
but they
steroid.
didn't get that information just out of thin air. They didn't get that misinformation out of thin air. They got that information because somebody was feeding them that information repeatedly.
I'm not
And
disputing that, but I'm also saying, but the information is also out there saying the opposite. There's people feeding you the harms of steroids over and over, but you disregard that because you want the buff body. There are people feeding you the harms of weight loss drugs
they're
over and
not
over,
feeding. They're
but
not.
you
Nobody's.
disregard that.
Nobody's. You don't see that on
I
TikTok.
do. I do see it a lot.
No,
Maybe
you see
you're,
the harms of. You see the harms of steroid use a lot
yes.
on TikTok.
Oh, I'm
You
not on
know.
TikTok. No, I'm not on
Right.
TikTok. I'm saying I see the harms on social media of steroid use. I mean, and if you are into bodybuilding, I'm sure there's a lot of trainings that talk about, hey, steroids are illegal, don't take them. I'm sure there are a lot of trainings when you're even like a college sprinter. Hey, don't take these drugs, they're illegal, you will be disbanded. And yet you hear about some of these athletes that try to still go around the system to take these drugs. And so I guess I'm not going to, and maybe this is me being naive, but to me, when it comes to steroids, there's so much out there that says that that is wrong. And I'm sure it's on TikTok too, even though I'm not on TikTok, but I'm sure it's out there on social media about the harms of steroids. I'm sure
And
it's
if
out
it
there on
is,
social
and if
media.
it is, it's presented. I'll guarantee you, if it is, it's presented there in a very scientific manner. One of the things I hate to say it, but Americans' attention is not held by scientific data. We provide If you're not entertaining me, if you're not sensationalizing what's going on, then you're not going to get my attention. I'm going to scroll on by. They spend about 3 seconds on something. And if you haven't already captured their attention, if you're providing some scientific information, hey, this could be harmful to your body. Granted, you see certain things that say 10 foods that you should never eat. Yeah, like, okay, well, then I'm gonna listen to this type of thing. Yeah, those types of things are out
Maybe
there.
you will,
But
maybe you won't. Because
yeah,
according to you, the people that stuff isn't on TikTok, and I'm saying it is. Because you will have someone, even like someone who gets breast implant augmentation. I know that there are women on there on TikTok talking about the dangers that happen when they got that plastic surgery to augment their breast and why they pulled it out. But again, if that is not what you want to hear, you're going to go find the people that are talking about, oh, my confidence was so built up after I got my breast augmented.
the vast majority of those things that educate about the harms of certain substances that we take in our body are advertising another product. And people have learned to scroll past those social media posts really quickly unless it's a product that they're interested in purchasing from the beginning. Otherwise, you're not going to. Social media is not there to educate people; it's to entertain people. It's to,
It
and
depends on
that's the
who's
way that we
using
treat
it.
it.
It
Well,
depends
that's the
on
way
who's
that we
using it.
treat it. The
I
vast
mean, I meant
majority
to
of
say it
people,
depends on who's using it because I do
it
think that
does,
there are
it
some
does.
educational stuff on social media.
But the vast majority of Americans are using social media for entertainment. They're not using it to try to learn. They're not using it to try to be educated about anything, because if they really wanted to be educated about something, they would find more credible sources than social media. But anyway,
I know we got to get on our
that's
topic,
down a
huh?
rabbit hole. Yeah, we mentioned we got to talk about the topic. So this month, my church is celebrating something called We Are Family, and so we were glad to have our show last week where we had our family members on, and we were just talking about family feuds. And it's everybody has them. You know what? Some people say you shouldn't be talking about your family business on social media, but the reality of it is that every family has some type of feuding that's going on. And I happen to believe that believe the Bible where it says, "And they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." And the word that follows after that is that, "And they were not ashamed unto death," which meant to me, I'm like, the reason what keeps people from sharing their testimony and keeps people from being free is the fact that people are ashamed of their testimonies a lot of times. And the Bible says you can't set people free if you're going to be ashamed of your testimony. Now, I happen to believe that there's a difference between a testimony and a confession. If you ain't fully delivered from it and you share it, that's just a confession. But the testimony is when you've arrived and you've come to the other side of it. You no longer have shame or guilt associated with it, and you're sharing it to help set somebody else free. So I was really excited about last week's show. Those of you who tuned in, I hope you enjoyed that as well. But it begs the question: then, what are the issue? And I really like to try to keep some of this stuff going on the Family Month as well with our We Are Family Month at church, because I think it's important for us to be able to identify and undergird what family really is. For some people, it's genetic alliances. Other people, it's more relational alliances. In this case, today we wanted to talk about, what do you owe me? What do I owe you? Do you owe your parents anything? Do you owe your siblings anything? Or do you just like, listen, the Bible says, "Oh, no man nothing but to love him." So is that what the extent of our debt to our family members are?
Oh, to be fair, the Bible also says, honor thy father and thy mother. But whether that means that means you owe them by virtue of them giving you life, I don't know about owing, and maybe let's define owing. Like you have an obligation to them, you have whether that's financial or you have just an obligation to be obedient, even if that includes financial. But I mean, it's also very clear in the Bible, hey, at some point you will following me may require you to depart from your parents. Particularly if they don't believe the same thing that you believe. And it is also, I'm sure it's in there that, hey, the sins of the father at some point don't pass down. So yeah, if you grew up in a household that was completely not of God, at some point, you're responsible for, either deciding to come to Christ or not. You don't get to use, well, my dad didn't teach me as an excuse. Um, But one of the reasons why this at least came to a topic to me also is because, particularly when it comes to minor children, I understand when it comes to adult children that perhaps at some point you will, I've got decades and decades before I get there, but you'll get to a point where you cannot take care of yourself in the same manner that you were when you were younger and had your minor children. And so I do think when it comes to that, as an adult child, I do think there should be, by honoring them, you do care for them, particularly if they're unable to care for themselves. But now, if they are able to care for themselves and you're a minor child, I don't know if you caring for them is more enabling than it should. And I don't think it's necessarily a responsibility because, again, if the Bible's talking about train up a child in the way they should go, if your training is to only do for me, I don't know if that is what the Bible means by training up in the way he should go. Um, so I don't know. I just don't think when it comes to minor children, a parent should put the obligation on that child to be the breadwinner of the house or to be financially responsible, even emotionally responsible for caring for the parent.
I saw this TikTok video. It's this again back on social media, but it's this, and I got engaged by it because this little kid couldn't be older than
Oh,
eight
the
or nine
algorithm
years
got you.
old. Yeah, right. He couldn't be older than 8 or 9 years old. He must be Indonesian, some type of Asian descent or whatever. But he goes out and gathers all the food. He had this the fish or whatever that he was having, chopped the fish, cleaned the fish, scaled it, and then cooked this entire whole meal. And so you just watch him just prepare this whole meal. Actually, it looked really delicious, you know. And then he finally sat down and ate some. One of them he sat down and ate it by himself, and then the other one he sat down and ate with his mother. And I watched it. I was like, hmm. Now she taught obviously she taught that child how to prepare meals. And if she's the beneficiary of having taught that child to prepare meals and to be independent, does is that compensation basically for what you have taught me? I've always been of the mindset I'm sitting there thinking, why am I doing chores like this when I got kids around the house? You know? That's my own personal belief. Now, I do think that some of that is some of it is me wanting to make sure that my children are
Training.
adequately prepared to be able to be self sufficient. But by the same token, some of it is like, yeah, I do a lot of providing for you. I expect that you're gonna owe me a little something in return here, whether that's chores or whether you're gonna owe me respect or
Don't
all
start
that kind of
earning your
stuff.
rent around here. Is that?
I do have a grown son with me right now, so we might need to find out what that. And that's a whole other story,
Well, I
It's
was about
just
to
like,
say, 'cause that's adult children. I think that is, a little different than minor.
but there are people who, let's say, for example, you got a childhood celebrity, who's now earning much more money than their parents could ever dream of earning. Is there something that child owes their mother or their parents? Is that funds? Are those funds? Should they go to the mother or to the parents,
Are
or
you
should they
asking
be?
because you think that they do? Do
I'm
you
just
think that,
asking
hey, if
you
God has
because
given
I
you
don't.
a talent and I have given you opportunities to maximize or capitalize on it, then I should get a cut? Is that where we are?
Yeah, I'm asking what your thoughts are on that.
Without saying that, if that's where you think, again, I think that you should save that money for the child to then use as they get older. Now, if you're saying, hey, listen, I am sacrificing my ability to provide for you so that you can maximize on that, I'm still like, well, that is your choice. I don't know if that's appropriate, if you should sacrifice what God has given you as a talent, or sacrifice being able to provide for your children, um, just so you can capitalize on their talent. I,
Why do
I
you
I just
think
don't
the
know if I
words
agree to
words
it.
like what's that's loaded so you could capitalize on your
Because
talent?
you're saying, hey, I am then going to use 10% of your earnings.
If I
That is to me is a capitalize on
if
it.
I had a minor child who was a star, for me, one, I would not trust the management of that child's career or safety, for that matter, and well-being to somebody other than me, because I know that they could totally be exploited by the industry one way or the other. And so if it meant that I leave my job in order to help them pursue theirs, then yeah, I would expect that you're going to pay somebody. You're going to pay, if you're paying a manager a 20% cut off of that, off the rip, you're going to pay a manager 20% anyway. And then you probably still have to pay other people to transport this kid, this minor child, from space to place, place to place. And so I think if I'm performing all those duties and I'm no longer actually actively pursuing my own career, or this has now become my career, I should be compensated from reasonably compensated from the earnings that this person makes. And
Well,
you
and
know,
I guess where I differ is I don't think you should put that child in a position to be a star just yet. I don't think that that child is ready for the responsibilities that come with that kind of adoration, with that kind of exposure, with that kind of responsibility. Now, again, and I think that's where I could differ from like, I don't, no more am I ready to manage you, or are you ready to be in this position that everyone is now demanding of you? I mean, you lose your childhood, you lose that training as it comes to even teaching you how to manage money. You use that training when it comes to teaching you how to be in professional relationships. You use that training even to teach you discernment, teach you boundaries, teach you, and I know you don't like the word boundaries, but teach you,
I like boundaries.
what when someone is taking advantage of you versus when, whatever they're offering is beneficial for you. And so I just don't know if, and I think there's a reason why minor children can't enter into contracts, because if you believe that they don't have the mindset to understand what they're obligating themselves to, then they're not ready for that kind of responsibility.
They're not, but they're parents, and that's the reason why it's very incumbent upon the parent to be actively involved to the extent that they can and are capable of being able to do that. I would not deprive my child of an opportunity for, you know, for celebrity just because I think they're 5 years old. What I would rather do is instead train my child how to handle this type of reaction. And if the child just can't handle it, I
A
think children,
5-year-old cannot handle it.
sure they can. There have been 5-year-olds who handle all kinds of celebrity.
Well,
But the
you name
question,
me a 5-year-old that handled it.
Rudy from the Cosby Show.
Okay.
So
I mean, I would disagree
I
but
don't
that she
remember what
was
her
at the
name.
level
I
of
don't remember
celebrity.
what her real name is, but
Keisha Knight Pulliam.
yeah, that's right.
But her parents still worked, so
Yeah, her parents did, but she still handled it well. Tia and Tamara, Tia and
they weren't
Tamara,
5 years old when they became
they
stars.
weren't 5 years old, but they were
Well, I said
still
name me a
very young.
5-year-old. That's what I said. Because I mean, because even with the Cosby Show, again, Keisha Knight Pulliam was not at the level of stardom that we're talking about here, even on the
What are you
Cosby Show, a
talking about?
5-year-old. She wasn't.
Everybody really adored her. She was probably the most adored of all the children. Like,
To me, comparing her to like the Olsen twins, that was a level of stardom that Keisha Knight Pulliam didn't have.
that probably is true, and then that probably is a product of our society as well, too. But
Exactly. But again, yes, we can use her as an example, and you can make your argument that she was able to handle it, although we'll never know.
yeah, but I don't know that I would put myself in a situation where I was like, hey, you had this opportunity. I just keep that hidden from my child. You had this opportunity, but we decided
We'll
it
keep it
wasn't
hidden
best for
because
you.
to me, yeah, that was not every opportunity is something that you should take. Just because you have an opportunity doesn't mean that God is saying walk through it. And a lot of things, because again, you look in the Bible when the devil was giving Jesus, hey, I'll give you X, Y, and Z. And he said, no, 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 I'm not taking that because that will sacrifice my obedience to God. Again, those boundaries that I know you don't like. But not every opportunity is a door you need to walk through. Not every
those of you who
opportunity is a
don't,
door.
those of you who don't recognize the shots that are being fired, I like boundaries. I think boundaries are necessary.
But
We had a
again,
show
not every
last week where we
opportunity.
found out that Sonya just liked to barricade herself. There's a difference between a boundary and a barricade. So
But not every opportunity is a door. And if you decide I'm not taking this opportunity because me as a parent, I don't even know how to make sure that you are safe in this moment, that is to me a justifiable reason as to decide this isn't for you right now.
so here's my thought. My thought is this is that we underestimate and underprepare our children. We underestimate what our children can do because we underprepare them. And if you look in the Bible times, many kings became kings when they were 12 or 13 years old. And to become a king of a nation when you're 12 or 13 years old is a far cry more burdensome than becoming a television star or something like that.
But we
It
also see in the Bible that they couldn't handle it. I mean, King Solomon, the wisest of them all, and yet destroyed his own kingdom. So, I mean, yeah, they you could
But
look
he
at it
didn't do it
that
as a child.
is
He didn't do it as a child.
it.
So
And
what's
again,
happens is that
he wasn't able just because that again he wasn't able to handle it. He allowed so many of these other influences to determine how he ruled his kingdom,
that was
despite
an
God
adult.
telling him,
His
"Don't do
failure
X, Y, and
came
Z."
as an adult, and so as adults, yes, we all fail many times. But as a parent of a child who has these opportunities, you can easily fail as well. But I think that's a failure of parenting, not necessarily failure of shielding and protecting and preparing your children. I think if you do it right, you can protect your children. But
But
that's
because that's why I use him, because he was wise. You can't
yeah,
deny he was wise, and
exactly.
yet the caused the destruction of his kingdom. And I do think some of that is parenting. But as we talked about at the beginning of this podcast or earlier, at some point you have to accept responsibility. You can't keep blaming, oh, my dad or my mom didn't do X, which is why then I should not be held responsible for doing Y.
Hmm.
And so, and if someone is wise as Solomon knew better, and you just still chose to walk in that manner. And to be honest, when you look at David, we saw David's weakness was women, same weakness that got passed down to Solomon, and
The
here we
same
are with the
weakness of
destruction.
Adam. It ain't nothing new. It was there from the beginning. It was always the weakness. A woman is Samson. You name it. The cause of most men's downfall is going to be women.
I'm not
And
going to dispute
Proverbs, I
that,
think
but then
Proverbs seven
are you
is a good
blaming?
example. It tells men to watch out for this
Are you
woman.
blaming parenting on that? Or are you blaming women? I mean,
A lot
it's
of it
like
is
endless with you.
a lot of it
You
is
blame
parent.
everyone but the person.
A lot of it is parenting, and so that's one of the reasons why Solomon wrote his books. And he was saying, "Hey, watch out for these women here, son, because they will take you under. They will pull you down if you don't." And he was trying to advise his son, and does his son listen? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I always say that there's a proverbial doc quote that I like to use, and that is that a bad experience is more persuasive than a good argument. And so sometimes people will take your advice and listen to your good argument, but most of the time they want to be
They want the
persuaded by
fruit,
that bad. They want
right?
that
They
bad
want the fruit.
experience. Exactly. Show me how it's wrong. So, but yeah. So unfortunately, I see people who actually um, exploit their children. Unfortunately, I've seen people who have gotten diagnosis for their children just so that they can get some disability checks and some additional money, income. And I obviously that's wrong. But there's a lot of people who say, "Ooh."
Why don't you explain why that's obviously wrong?
I've known a parent who their child, most of their childhood, thought that they were intellectually disabled. And the reason why was because their mother wanted to get a social security check for her. So she kept them in IEPs and, individual educational plans. And so you can get a check from them each month. That's what they would do. And they, instead of training their child and teaching their child how to overcome, if they did have some learning impediment, they actually reinforce that learning impediment for financial gain so that they get their SSI check from the government for having a disabled child. Or by the same token, I watched even one of my brothers whose son is on the spectrum, and they could have easily have decided, hey, we're going to put him in these special classes, but he insisted, no, my son's going to be in the classes with the regular students and he's going to learn. And I've seen other people who've done that. My child is going to learn what the other ones. It means that you require a lot of extra effort in order to teach that child and to work with that child. But on one hand, you got somebody saying, "Hey, I'm willing to do the investment." But on the other hand, you see people like, "I don't want to do the investment, and I just want to reap some kind of immediate reward," not realizing what the eventual harm is. But that person that was kept on those individual education plans, IEPs or whatever I think that's what they're called, individualized education plans, graduated high school, discovered, hey, I can actually learn. Went to college, got her master's degree, and is now thriving. You know, he's writing all kinds of things, writing books, and it's thriving. Why? Because they discovered, hey, there was more in me than my parent really wanted me to recognize. And the reason why my parent didn't, and it's not that we're a bad parent, but I think it's the way that people are socialized sometimes. And I don't I get upset when people say something, hey, the government's trying to keep black people dependent by creating social networks. I was like, no, the government's not doing it. If I buy you a car so that you can get to work, back and forth to work, if I give you a car and you happen to get a DUI because of it, doesn't mean that me giving you the car was a setup for you to get a DUI. That's stupid. You made some choices. You could have either used the thing that I provided for you for your advancement, or you could use the thing that I provided for you for your destruction. You choose which way it's going to be. And in this case, I think people were socialized to say, hey, this is the best thing going right now. If you can get some extra money from the government, we can't get jobs, we can't get good paying jobs, we're struggling here or there. And so if you got an opportunity to get money from SSI, by saying one of your children are kind of slow, then you can go ahead and do it. And that's one way that you can help feed your family. So I don't really necessarily fault that person so much, because I understand that they were a product of the society that they were living in. But at this day and age, this shouldn't happen.
And so essentially you're saying if you're lying or deceiving by using your child, that is obviously wrong. You're being deceptive. Because anyone that says, oh, people are or black people are using the system, I like, of course, I'm just gonna be like, oh, Donald Trump. He's using the system government better than anyone that I could even imagine. But nonetheless, I do understand, because we talked about here before, how generational poverty also affects the learning of a child. And again, not excusing you doing that, because that I agree that that is wrong to be deceptive for the purpose of feeding your family. But I understand, or I should say, I can empathize with you while still strongly disagreeing with you that, hey, particularly as single parents, there is a lot to do, and educating your children is also a job. And if you feel like I've got to work 3 jobs just to be able to give you the food you need so that you are able or in a position to go to school and retain some information, I can see why you want assistance with that. Again, I agree it's wrong. But I do think it's important, particularly as us as people, to empathize so we can find solutions to that versus just saying, oh, that's a bad parent. Because I mean, it's hard to, as you
We
can.
have one guest who said we owe planet Earth. Maybe we do owe Mother Earth. I mean, if you start saying that she's our parent, what do we owe to
She's
her?
Mother Nature.
Yeah, Mother Nature. Do we owe her? Yeah, and you would think that we actually do owe nature something because of what it provides for us, and this is the way that we repay it by harming it further. And
By
unfortunately,
biblical
that
standards, anything God blesses us is a responsibility, right?
is a responsibility, and unfortunately, we misuse some of those responsibilities, and those are also our children as well. And frankly, sometimes the whole issue is a whole topic for another conversation. Is how do you then handle adult children who are coming back to? They then owe you something more than the children, than young children who you continue to help. And I don't know. That's for me. I don't know. My thought is this, and I'll say that in conclusion. I said what my children owe me is to be successful and hopefully live the life that God called them to. That's the only expectation that I have for my children.
Oh, so simple, but we have to then understand what Mark means by success, because if they're making a lot of money but doing
Well,
it improperly or ungodly, I don't know if you would classify that as success, even
no,
though
I
you
wouldn't call
still
that
may ask for
success.
that
As I
car.
said, live a life that God called me to do, and that's what I consider success. If you're living the life that God called you to live, and you can confidently say, "I'm living. This is the path that God had me on," then I consider you successful. Whether you have money in the bank or whether you don't, you're successful because
But even in that, like I said, we'll save it for another conversation. But even in that, they could say, you could even using like a Solomon or a David, they could say, "Hey, I am doing the work that God has called me to do," but their professional, they're not professional, personal lifestyle may be different. Or hey, they may not have what you consider a lifestyle that is, success, while nonetheless having, other professional successes. And so, even because being a Christian is hard. And so not every decision your child is going to make, you're going to say, "Oh, I believe God called you to do that," even though that child may dispute that.
it ain't matter. It's not a matter of what I believe. It's about what they believe.
It's your belief. You
Especially if
saying
they're
this
an
is what they
adult.
owe you. You're saying this is what you owe me. So that then they have to understand,
Exactly.
what do you believe, so that
Listen,
they can make sure to give that back to you.
if my child tells me that this is the path that I believe God has me on, I'm like, okay, good.
You'll say, okay,
Congratulations.
you won't argue it. You won't not, you
Congratulations.
won't question it. You'll say,
Congratulations.
okay.
I might question it. I might question it. I might ask this or there or whatever. But if they're like, okay, well, I'm like, okay, well, I can't convince you. I'm not going to tell you what God would do and what God wouldn't do. God, His ways confound ours. He uses the ways of foolishness to confound the
I agree,
wise.
but that doesn't mean I don't think you would still tell them, "Well, the Bible says this. Are you sure what you're doing
Well,
is
now if
is
it's in
what is in this?"
if it's contradicting that which the Bible would say, if it's contradicting what biblical precepts, then yeah, I would question that. But if it's consistent with and you feel like this is the path of God that had you chose you to go on, then I've got nothing to say but Godspeed. Let's see how that thing work out for you then. Because if God is for you, then nobody can be against you. Let's see how it's working out for you.
So
And
to
then
Greg, who had the infamous comment yesterday or last week. So if you want to have your multiple wives and you want to keep arguing that is okay, Mark says, "Godspeed. I hope it works out."
exactly. Or if you want to barricade yourself in by endless boundaries, and you believe that that's what God
If
has
that's
you
what
to
God
do.
tells me to do, you will say, "Sonia, Godspeed." And I hope
I
that works
wasn't
out for
talking
you.
about Sonya. What are you talking about? Anyway.
But this is again why it's family. I had someone after our show ask me, "So are you guys gonna be okay?" I was like, "Listen, this is family. We can banter, we can give each other a hard time, but we will still laugh." And you will see us next week laughing,
Right.
you know, and moving on, because ultimately we do want the best for each other. And so if at any point I thought Mark just wants to bring me down and puts me in this bubble to make me feel
It's
bad
fun
about
doing it
myself,
though. It is fun. The process is fun, but that's not the motivation.
then that would be another conversation. But I know Mark's intent, even when we disagree, I know his intent is not to put me down, but to perhaps get me to think about a different perspective. And so
Absolutely. I'm glad you see it that way. Sonya, can I say I love you?
oh, look at that. And it's touched because you don't say that, and you
I
very
don't say it.
clear about your
I've never
intent
said
not to
that.
say
I don't think I've
it.
ever said that to you before, but I love you,
Well,
Sonya.
thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So, for those that have tuned in, because I can't say it back because it wouldn't be authentic for you. You want me to say it when it is naturally what I want to say in a
Well,
certain particular moment
that's
in time. So,
perfectly fine. Whatever, however the Lord leads you.
So those that tune in, I hope you've been liking and commenting this episode. Please make sure you are catching us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as you can catch a repeat of this episode on Star Radio and KDAY Live, as well as YouTube. So hopefully you are subscribed over there. So until next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, thank you guys so much and have a blessed week.